This is the Pubs and Pints Podcast. This podcast encourages open conversations where guests freely share their views. Their thoughts and opinions are solely their own and are intended for discussion purposes.
I got my makeshift podcast room here. My wife's working from home. I get kicked out of her office.
How's everything going anyway?
Everything's good, man. Life is good down here.
Good.
There's a whole bunch of retired pipers coming down. Well, I don't know if they're retired or not, but
Yeah, in St. Augustine. I'll be down there.
are you coming?
Yeah.
That's where I live.
Yep.
I don't live in
I'll
St.
be
Augustine, but I'll see you.
You're close. Yeah, I'll be there. Okay, we're here today with Matt Long. Not only is Matt an FDNY brother of mine, but we actually started our careers together in the academy. He is an absolute gentleman with an extraordinary story of how strength, endurance, and grit didn't just save his life, it rebuilt it. Mayor Bloomberg was on the news telling New Yorkers about Matt's grave condition after being run over by a 20-ton bus during the 2005 transit strike. He told New Yorkers to pray for Matt. Matt is one of 9 children, grew up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, which is a significant Irish-American stronghold. The ingredients of faith, family structure, brotherhood, and the fighting spirit that is characteristic of the Irish played a big role in who Matt Long is today. You are about to hear one of the most remarkable stories about physical and mental endurance and downright pure Irish grit. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me, buddy.
I'm really glad to have you on the show. How crazy is it that these two young bucks were in the academy together 32 years ago?
32 years, 1993, right? Were we in the same squad?
I don't think we were in the same school. Well, I had
Oh,
Tex
yeah, you
was
behind
my-
me. Then you sat right behind me.
Okay.
We were on the same side
So
of
you were
the
in the front. You were in the
I was
front.
I was in the front squad with Galini and Jensen.
Mike
yeah.
Galini is a character.
Yeah.
What a
We had a
character.
good crew.
He's one of the, so I go over to Ireland every year with a group of 10 guys, and Mike Galini is one of those 10 guys.
Oh, that's cool.
He's quite the character.
Recently
He's a great
retired, I
addition
think.
to-
Yeah,
Yes.
recently retired.
Yes. Yeah.
We only had
very-
126 of us, so we got to know pretty much everyone. You know, nowadays there's 300 in the class.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
We had 126, right?
126 guys. Yeah, 126. Now, how much do you remember the academy? I don't even remember much.
I remember, I do remember quite a bit of it. Now that you're asking, we had a good crew. I remember our Friday nights out. It's a different world. I guess every 10 years things kind of change in life, right? Like, we went on 93. The guys that went on in 2003 can't say the same thing, that they did the same things we did 10 years ago. We had football games on Fridays after on the Rock, sometimes against the instructors. I remember that dearly. I think we went half class, and some instructors came out. There may or may not have been alcohol involved, leaving the Rock, and it wasn't a big deal. To be honest with you, I'm the first person in my family to become a firefighter.
Same here.
Well, you said this is just, was just shooting the shit. So I feel like I should get a Guinness out. But, my brother Jim and I were very close. We're like Irish twins, 13, 14 months apart. And he really wanted to be a fireman. And I remember I was in high school, and my dad's like, "What are you going to do?" And I was like, "I don't know." Yeah, I always thought I was going to go to Wall Street. And he's like, "Well, you got to have a plan B. Take some of these tests with your brother." So I didn't want to be a cop, didn't want to pick up garbage. So I said, all right, I'll take the fire department test with Jimmy. So we took the written test in our senior year of high school. Then I went off to college.
What year was that?
That was 1985, 85,
Okay.
86.
All right, so you're a year older than me. I was 86.
So took that test. There was, like everything in New York, there's always delays and whatnot. I didn't take the physical until junior year in college, almost 3.5, 4 years later. And then we had a guy die taking that physical, if you remember.
Same test as it, yep.
Yeah, we took the same physical, right? So you were in Columbus Circle, right?
No, I thought I was
Right.
downtown.
Was it
Did they
downtown?
have 2 locations? You know what? I don't really remember.
They may have. For some reason, I think it was up in Columbus Circle. There was a
Okay.
big place. They
Maybe
took
it
it up
was.
there. That's my memory. But a guy died taking the test, so that was paused. So I graduated college in '89, and I was 1,800 on the list. And my brother was like, we were only like 0.004 points away in the score, and he was number 2,100 on the list. So I had graduated college, went down to Wall Street, got fired from down on Wall Street, opened up my first bar with my brother, and then boom, the fire department called. So, my dad's backup plan for me was perfect because I was like, at that point there was nothing better to do than, be a fireman if you're not going to climb a ladder, but own a bar.
Speaking of bars, when we graduated the academy, didn't we go to one of your bars like as our graduation place? Was it Long Shots?
Yes, we did.
How many bars did you have?
I had one, shoot, maybe. Yeah, I guess I had two while I was in the academy. I was in, I had left them. You're supposed to, not be working when you leave. So my brother Jimmy took over.
You had other people running it.
We had Third and Long. We opened in 1991, and then probably about 93, just about while I went into the academy, we opened a place with another friend named Long Shots, and that had a party room on the second floor. It was by the police academy on 19th Street and 2nd Avenue.
Yeah.
And we had our graduation party up there. I think we did.
Yeah, I remember that. That's one thing I remember, and I always recall that because you used to put your name in the name of the bars. You had Long Shots, Third and Long.
Mm-hmm. Well, right. It's funny. So Third and Long started out being not even a sports bar. It was Third and Long because it was 3rd Avenue and Jimmy and I Long, and the same landlord owned the building on 2nd Avenue, and that place had closed. It was called PJ Reynolds for a long time, and it was a big cop hangout. But what the mayor did, or the police commissioner did, was at some point in the early 90s said, that's it. Cops from a specific precinct can no longer go into a alcohol establishment in their precinct. So the academy was right up the block, and they could no longer come in for lunch, and they could no longer go for happy hour. The 19th precinct was right up, the 13th precinct. 13th precinct was in the academy. They could no longer go there. So the place closed. And the landlord said, hey, do you think you could try to do what you're doing here, there? So he gave us it. I was like, I don't know, man. I don't like the location. I don't like this. And we were just all sitting around saying, it's a fucking Long Shot. And I was like, let's do it. That's the name.
Long Shots.
So Long Shots.
Yeah. Wow.
And it didn't work. It didn't work. We're only open for a year.
Okay.
Yeah, we're only open for a year.
So why don't we let's go back in time. Let's go back to your early years growing up in Brooklyn.
So yeah, you introduced I grew up in Bay. I always tell my family we have a tale of two families. There's 9 of us. I'm number 2. And the top 4 actually grew up in the other side of Brooklyn. We grew up in Cypress Hills, East New York. Okay. So I didn't move to Bay Ridge, and I think the lower tier grew up in Bay Ridge. We didn't move to Bay Ridge till 1983. I was already a sophomore in high school. So I grew up in Cypress Hills, Brooklyn. I had the best lower middle class upbringing ever. It's like right out of that Wonder Years TV show. My dad owned an ice cream parlor with his brother. He made his own ice cream in the basement, homemade ice cream. It was the place. It might as well be called Arnold's on Happy Days. It was just an amazing place. All the teenagers, the older kids in the neighborhood, after they were out, drinking from brown bags or doing whatever they were doing, they would They would get to the payphone, call their parents and say, hey, can we get an extra hour? We're going to go to Long's Ice Cream Parlor. And the parents were like, oh, as long as you're in Long's, go ahead. Jukebox playing, French fries, cherry Coke, milkshakes. It was just a great way for me to grow up. Kid's dream. Yeah. Every Wednesday was a half day of school. Went to Blessed Sacrament on Euclid and Crescent, and Euclid and Fulton. And we'd run over to, my dad was making ice cream every Wednesday morning. So half day, we'd go there. It was like a luncheonette. We'd have lunch, go down the basement, get some ice cream fresh out of the machine. It was great. It was great. And that I remember was all free. And when we got older and moved, my dad sold the ice cream parlor and opened up a liquor store. Now I'm of age to drink, and I remember my childhood was like, Dad, can I have a chocolate cone? Make it myself sometimes, or they would just give it to me, and I would just walk out. So I remember walking in, getting a bottle of vodka to take to a party or something. And say, I see you, Dad. He said, "Oh, where you going? You're paying for that. Ice cream is free. Alcohol's not."
No. Now, was that still in Cypress Hills, were you now in Bay Ridge?
That was in Bay Ridge. Yeah. So when we moved to Bay Ridge, he closed up the ice cream parlor, and his next venture, he was always an entrepreneur, and his next venture was with his brother again. They opened up Long's Ice Cream, but it was Long's Ice Cream Parlor. Then it was Long's Liquor, Wines and Liquors.
See that? The name just keeps staying in all the names. That's great. The apple didn't fall far from the tree there.
No. He had the ice cream parlor for 26 years, 25 years, and he had the liquor store from probably another 25. I could say maybe 30. It's still named. He sold it, but it's still named Long's Wines and Liquors in Bay Ridge. Yeah.
Okay. So now in Bay Ridge, did you feel that how it was I know it was a very Irish American community there. You felt that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Cypress Hills was a little different. Bay Ridge, a bigger community. Bay Ridge, multiple parishes, and that's like the old Irish Catholic, where it wasn't like when you met someone in Bay Ridge, like, where are you from? And you would say St. Pat's or Our Lady of Angels. Yeah. You would talk about parish, that's where you were from. You're like, oh, I'm not 76th Street. I'm OLA. You're St. Pat's, and there would be a rivalry. There's a rivalry.
Yeah. That's throughout as you get older, all of New York City. That's all. My father grew up in South Bronx. It was all
especially
about
the Irish, especially the Irish community.
Yeah.
The Italians are the same way. They talk, but not like the Irish.
Yeah,
you talk about what church you came from, what parish.
I always hear you say, "Oh, I'm Irish Catholic." You don't really hear people say, "Oh, I'm Italian Catholic," right? Irish Catholic has like a sort of I don't know, it's like saying, I got this true, strong Irish grit and I go to church. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have everything that's wrong with me and I go to church for forgiveness. Yeah. Your stubbornness and, that's what I credit my mom for, her strength when I did get hurt, because I wasn't the only of the 9 to be in a situation like that. My other brother, Frank, was in a bad accident as well. And I credit my mom's Irish Catholic grit for being as strong as she could to help her kids get through the hell, quite frankly.
Yeah. So growing up, one of 9 kids,
mm-hmm.
That's it's like socialization through friction, right? You're fighting for food at the dinner table, even you're probably even fighting for parental attention, space in the house,
yeah.
But right?
Yeah.
So what was it like? That's probably what gave you your competitive nature.
100%. I talk about it all the time. So, look, we had a softball team fielded. We had a basketball team with subs, 2-on-2, 3-on-3. Let's go. We got it. Everything was already there. So did we need outside companionship? No. Thank God we had plenty of it. But I always talk about how my mom and dad did a great job at shielding us from what was actually going on in life. By no means did I ever think that we were poor, but my mom and dad later in life told us that pasta went a long way, and there was nights when dad said, just feed the kids, and I was like, wow, like I never saw that. But that's
a lot of ice cream to sell. I mean, 9 kids, and
yeah.
But that was the way a lot of us grew up. Especially in those Irish American families. So we all kind of grew up in that type of atmosphere. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was, he worked his ass off, and mom, worked her ass off taking care of us at home. But yeah, there was a lot of fighting for attention. I always say that when you put all 9 of us together, it kind of goes down with a little spike at Jim. Jim's like the tallest guy in the family at 6'3", 6'4", but then it starts going down, and Eddie, who's a lieutenant now in the fire department, he's the tiniest one. So I felt like he's just the duck that couldn't get to the middle of the table to get any food. So his growth chart was slowed down a bit.
Right. So let's talk about 2005.
Yeah, 20 years ago. Yeah, it's gonna be 20 years ago.
Next week, Monday. Monday is 20 years. Yeah. Is that crazy?
No. Yes, 22nd, Monday. You're right.
Crazy. That's
Absolutely crazy. Yeah, I'm shocked, especially since I did a podcast with famous business coach and personal coach Ed Milet, and just last year, so 19 years after he described it, well, I was given a 1% chance to live, and when I was talking to him, he described it as like, he was like, brother, do you know that's a 99% chance not to be here?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I never looked at it that way. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
So 20 years ago next week, I quickly learned that I was a part of a bigger family than the 9, and in New York City, actually, I was asleep for most of it, but you lived it, knowing me from Proby School and all the years of being a fireman together. That how people came together for me was unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want to kind of touch on on the podcast, is how like your faith, your family structure, and when I say your family structure, I mean your first family and then your second family, the FDNY, and how all that kind of came together and really was part of your entire process of healing and staying alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's even that fighting Irish nature. But why don't you walk us through those early days?
Well, let's just for the audience that may not know or needs. So after 9/11, Tim, we both were working during September 11th. After September 11th, things changed for a lot of people, and I knew that my life was on a bad path. I was drinking a lot more than normal, and Irish firemen tend to drink more than normal. But I was drinking a little more, and probably with a little more reasoning of battling with the depression of what happened. I think it's 6 or 7 of our classmates that died. That
it was 6.
6, right? But
Yeah.
one we were very close with, Bronco. Yeah, the man. Cheers to him. I noticed in the years after 9/11, that I got out of shape, and I was always prided myself on staying in shape because I was a basketball player in college and played for the FDNY, traveled the country and the world playing at the World Games. 2, I loved a job that I didn't think I wanted. My dad convinced me to take that test, but it wasn't soon after walking through or graduating from Proby School that when I walked through the doors at 53 and 43 that I was like, holy shit, this is what I need to do. This is where I'm in a good spot. I loved going to work. But after September 11th, that all kind of changed, and I couldn't really get grips of it. So, hey, did what everyone else was doing, have a beer, have another drink, and the pain and the questions went away. A good friend of mine asked me to do a race to raise money, and I was always up for raising money for someone in need. I think most firemen are, whether it's connected to their firehouse or not. I think most firemen generally are giving people, and whether it's time or money, most likely time, or their expertise and what their specialty is outside of work, they'll give it. So I said, sure, let's do something. So he asked me to do this triathlon to raise money for cancer, and I slowly started getting back in shape. And this is 2004, so 3 years after September 11th. I slowly started getting back in shape. The bad back went away. I started drinking less, and I started enjoying going back to work. And so I was really, in 2004, 2005, I was 38 years old, top of the game. I was fit. I was happy again. I had all those demons were pretty much in check. New York City Transit Authority goes on strike. At this time, I was an instructor at the academy. I took a detail from the firehouse to teach at the academy for a year. And it was my last day before Christmas. And, riding up 3rd Avenue and about 3-4 blocks from my apartment, and I was struck and run over by a 20-ton bus that was hired to go uptown and get people down to Wall Street because of the restrictions of travel. This was at 5:38 in the morning, Tim, and this is the first, I always tell my, I used to go back and tell my doctors all the time, like, thank you, you saved my life. And they said, it was all a matter of circumstance. And one of the first things they'll tell me is that if I was struck a half hour or 45 minutes later, that I'd be dead.
That's crazy.
I was hit at 5:38, and they got me to the hospital before all the day's surgeries were in the ERs. So I went from room to room to room without hesitation. He goes, if it would have happened 45 minutes, 45 minutes later, and they rolled you into this hospital, we would have had to clear out some of these ERs and decon them and do all the stuff to sanitize them, get them ready for you, and you wouldn't have made it. So that's the first life-saving. Yeah. Actually, it's not even the first. You know what the first is? I talk about it all the time, and we talk about Irish firemen, but Irish cops the same way. The first life-saving action, selfless action, was an Officer Kelly, who I've never met. He was in ESU 3, I believe. And
you still have never met this guy?
Nope.
Wow.
So I went and tried a couple of times. I've seen the truck. I went by the academy, but I missed him every time. And the way the story was told to me, Donald Buckley had a 2-truck. The 2-truck was the first truck on the scene. And when they took the hood that I was wearing, because it was like 18 degrees out, they took the Nomex or the Gore-Tex hood I was wearing for cycling, I was on my bike, off my head, Donald Buckley said, "Holy shit, it's Matt Long from 43 Truck." That's the last thing I remember. That's the last thing I remember hearing. And I was told that Officer Kelly, or Sergeant Kelly, said, "He's a firefighter?" And they said, "Yeah, he works right up here in Spanish Harlem." And instead of putting his blue gloves on and everything, he reached into my groin and compressed my femoral artery that was severed and slowed the bleeding down while they worked on me.
Which probably saved your life right there.
Which is the first life-saving action of that day, 100%.
All of the ducks are lining up here for you to live right out of the gate.
100%. They got me to the right hospital, New York Presbyterian. I joke, but 20 years ago it wasn't a joke. But if they would have made a right turn up 2nd Avenue, and they would have took me to Bellevue, and I don't know what would happen.
Well, you had the right doctors at New York Presbyterian, that's for sure.
Yep. And that's the other duck that was in a row, is that I had the head of every department. It wasn't like maybe they had a meeting of all the chief's residents or chief surgeons, but all the top docs were there that day. Every one of them.
Yeah.
And like when I remember leaving, and I'm like, "Oh, who's your doctor for this?" And I tell them, and the nurses would go, "Ooh, and who's your doctor for this?" And they would just, "Wow, you got all the top." I'm like, "Thank you." So I got lucky.
Walk us through some of what the injuries were.
So I broke every bone in my left leg. All the fractures were compound. So it means the bone comes out of the skin. The tib, fib, my left foot, femur. On the right side, I shattered and broke my pelvis, compound fracture. My femoral artery was severed. The worst part was the bike cut me in half. So it ripped me from my anus to my sternum, basically just like a can, tearing out my abdominal wall. So all my organs were exposed. And the last final touch was shattering my right shoulder. Got to the hospital. I think my doctor tells me in the first 10 or 11 hours, I received more than 68 units of blood. And, the nurses were like, "We're wasting blood. This is ridiculous. This guy's not going to make it. And we're just filling him up." So it took them about 10, 11 hours to finally get the bleeding under control. And I remember we get back to stubborn Irish Catholic mom. Again, these things in the first couple of weeks have been told to me, right? Because I was in a medically induced coma. The doctor went out to tell my parents that he has about a 1% chance to live, that this is as bad as it gets. And my mother's response to him, without hesitation, was, "Do the best you can. He's running the Boston Marathon in April." And the doctor kind of like, okay. But that doctor was a marathon runner, and he knew what it took to qualify for Boston. I just came off a 3-hour 13 marathon for the fire department, and he went back into the nurses and said, "Keep giving him blood. We're not dealing with a regular guy."
That's your mom coming in, not frantic, but she's coming in as the matriarch of a nine kid family.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have time to sit there and grieve or cry. She's going in like with that, we're getting this done.
Yep.
With a mission.
100%.
That's great.
100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a hell of a journey. So yeah, so now the next day is all comprised of, I spent 5 months in the hospital, 43 surgeries in 5 months. I probably had 10 post release of the hospital. The last one was about 6 years ago, 5 years ago. So I know I'll be back in for a tune-up. According to the doctor, he's like, don't go too far away. You'll be back. So I was cut up so bad. They said the more you get cut, the more scar tissue that grows. So my biggest issue now in with life, besides some muscles that didn't come back and walking with a limp, is my digestive tract was cut up so bad that scar tissue is growing like moss at the bottom of a lake that doesn't move, and it causes blockages. And sometimes they pass, sometimes they don't. So it's about 5 years ago, they had to go back in and clean them up.
Wow.
So he said, hopefully, just 10 years.
So after the accident, you're in the hospital for 5 months. How far after the accident did they say, all right, he's gonna live, but we don't know what the extent of it is?
It was probably after I woke up. So probably sometime in late January, early February, when we started having, when I was awake now, and the doctors started having conversations like, listen, you still have a long road ahead of you, and you're not where we want you to be, because my abdomen was still open. I still had a colostomy bag, and my wounds haven't healed yet. So the risk of infection could really turn this thing upside down. But they believed that I was out of the woods. And they said, and I remember being angry with one of my doctors, and he said to me flat out, he goes, listen, he goes, we have a tough job. And I agreed with him. I said, I know, doc. He goes, I can't do my job worrying about your quality of life. I just worried about saving your life. And the quality of your life is going to be up to you. So I didn't like that at all, because I had more attachments to me.
But that's his.
That's his job. And in a way, that's our job, right? I mean, we go to as especially being two guys that were in trucks for so long, your job is search and rescue and get them out. We don't lay there and say, oh, look how badly his person is burnt. And then maybe, we have to get them out and do our job.
It's that. Yeah.
And that's what he's doing. Same thing.
Yep.
Different level.
Right. I think that's why a lot of doctors have like poor bedside manner, because they're only really focused on one thing. They don't get into the empathy of it. And
I think that's the more talented doctors that are like that, especially in the ER and the emergency trauma surgeons. They kind of have to be, because if their emotions took over, who knows what the outcome would have been.
Right.
It was pretty funny you say that, because my main surgeon, who I miss, he's passed, but there was a moment in time when he came out to speak to my mom and dad, and my sister, who was very vocal, my older sister, was like, excuse me, what are you doing out here? You should be inside taking care of him. And he was like, excuse me, who are you? He's like, I'm here to talk to them. You just go sit down. And she was livid. She had all sorts of connections. She's calling politicians. Who is this asshole? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, he's saving my life. Let it go.
So let's just shift for a second. While this entire thing is going on, the fire department, I'm giving you my perspective a little bit, but the fire department is this family that just says, okay, boom, we have stuff to take care of. And they just, making meals for you. What did you hear about later about how everything was taken? I remember when I was in Squad 41, we were making meals. I know all the firehouses in the area were making meals for your family. It was that whole 5 months. The fire department really, that's what the fire department does. That's why they call it a brotherhood.
Yes. And it's very much like a family. You don't get along with your siblings all the time, but you will not desert them when they need. So you can't tell me that you liked all 60 members of your firehouse or whatever houses you were in. There's always a one you're like, whatever. But
great point.
If he needed or she needed, you would be there. So to be honest with you, I didn't know it came from as far as 41, Squad 41. So I thank you if I didn't thank you 20 years ago. But I did know that, I was hurt. So I worked in 43 Truck, which was the tip of the 10th Battalion, and, the lower tip of the 12th Battalion. So every house in the 10th Battalion I knew rotated, and some houses from the 12th rotated. The hospital was a little far out of reach from the 12th Battalion, but I knew they all rotated on a weekly basis because it was a daunting task. But for 5 months, Tim, lunch and dinner was delivered to that hospital. Now, the first 6 or 7 weeks, I was asleep. So they were just taking care of my family. They were just taking care of my family. And then there was so many visitors when they started, that's when I think it got to a point where like, oh, we got to make, 6 trays of chicken. Instead, there's like 40 people up there. And the funny part about it, when I got told this, it was great. And I still had a feeding tube for a while because I was on a trach. And that's like the only scar that everybody sees all the time is on my neck. I was on a feeding tube. But once that came out, I remember telling my father, I'm like, all right, who's got the meal tonight? No, he's like, what are you talking about? I go, what firehouse has the meal tonight? He's like, oh, 16 and 39. I'm like, all right, get me the phone. Hey, what? This is Long up in the hospital. What's for dinner? They're like, what? You're placing orders now? But they did it until the day I left. And so for 5 months, we were served lunch and dinner at that hospital. Not only that, but there was also a fireman sitting at my door, probably for the first 3 months.
Like security.
In uniform, just standing, to be the bearer of news, good or bad, to make sure that
he was your house watchman.
Yeah, yeah. And look, and I've been on this other side of it. I've been on the other side of it. And I'd be remiss to say that I was a member of the fitness unit when I got hurt. So the rock also cooked. It wasn't just the firehouses. The guys my mom would joke. She's like, well, when the meal came in, she goes, we know who's cooking tonight. It's either the healthy guys from the fitness unit, because everything, there was a salad and there was vegetables, or it was the big chicken parmesan and 10 pounds of pasta.
Yeah. So it's funny because, the fire department does have that dark sense of humor, right? And there's no filters. And here you are, you're calling the firehouse and saying, hey, what do you bring me tonight?
Yeah.
You get to break balls too.
Yeah. They had a good laugh. But they had a good laugh at that.
When you were saying what your injury was, I had heard you say that you got, cut up from your rectum up to your sternum. And I wanted to use the joke, rectum damn near killed him.
I'm going to use that.
I don't know how dark we can go,
Yeah, it's okay.
There is no filters with the fire department, right?
No. And I don't want to get into how things change, but you take those filters away, you ruin the fabric of the job. And, from the silliness of throwing water off the roof to the pranks we played and the nicknames we gave, and there's all a reason for it. And
that's part of the camaraderie, and it's kind of sad that a lot of that stuff was kind of, they've been
taboo.
Shifting away
it's taboo
from it.
now.
It's taboo. It's part of bullying, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Look, I tell everyone, and what I tell my kids now, and when I meet people, I've moved to Florida 3 years ago, and I'm it's hard to re-socialize yourself at 60, but I'm meeting new people down here with new interests in golf and whatever else. And, 6 months in, a guy I just met starts breaking my balls. And he's like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm like, no, don't be sorry. I said,
You don't
I
understand.
did 17 years in the New York City Fire Department. Now I know you like me.
Yeah.
I said, if you didn't break my chops about my swing or about whatever else or having no hair, then I know I wouldn't be accepted. Now I'm in. Gloves are off, but I'm in.
That's right. Gloves are off. It's funny, though. There are some people that like to give it, but they can't take it. It's the difference between thick skin and thin skin. But, the fire department it's kind of like it's a tribal culture. I would assume that the bar, you were in the bar trade as well, and that's sort of a tribal culture too. So how about the bars? Was there some sort of any kind of support there from Third and Long? Yeah,
I was very lucky to be running so many circles. So at that point, I was involved in 3 New York City establishments: Third and Long, Turtle Bay, and MJ Armstrong's, that we named after one of our bartenders that died on 9/11. And their role, my partners and staff and friends, customers, they started running blood drives, and I did a lot of work with the New York City Blood Center.
I remember that. Yep.
And, they said that you're my accident. And then the drives my friends and people ran actually took them from the brink of, there's always a moment in time now when it's cold and stuff where they're in blood shortage. And he said took us from a blood shortage to a blood surplus in a quick 2 months. So they had multiple blood drives at the pubs where they just said, hey, give a pint, get a pint. And my partners just gave the beer away for free and stuff like that.
Yeah. I remember that time, and I was always a little, I wasn't somebody that liked needles too much, you know what I mean? And I never really had given blood until that time. That was the first time in my life I ever gave blood.
You got a little Tim Grant in me?
Now I have you have a lot of fire. I think a lot of fire department blood runs through you, right, brother? I remember being a little afraid of that. But then after that, I started doing it more often, giving blood.
Yeah, I try to do it. I try to do it every year. I haven't done it since I'm down here yet, but I'll get back into it.
It's good.
I did a lot of work for the Blood Center. I did some commercials for them.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah. I did some donation commercials for them early on, and they did posters all over the fire department in the city of New York. It was good. I that was one of my ways to give back.
Yeah. So you struggled for a while after coming home, right?
Yeah. Much like the time after September 11th, depression, pity parties. Why my younger brother Eddie had just become a fireman. He moved in with me to take care of me. You never think you want to be in that situation, but like he was taking care of me like you would take care of an elderly parent. You're wiping my ass, getting me out of bed, putting me in freaking the wheelchair, getting me to the couch. It was really hard. It was very hard on both of us. It was hard. But yeah, so there was quite a bit of time where I always said to my family later on, it wasn't why this happened to me, because bad stuff happens all the time. Every day there's someone getting hit by something or, accidentally, whatever. It was, why did I live? That was my pity question. Not why did it happen, but why did I live? And I remember, right before I left the hospital, my mom brought in the family priest. Every Irish Catholic family has a family priest. Father James Devlin, who we met when we were in high school. He was the priest at Holy Family in Park Slope. And he wound up marrying a bunch of us, and he just became really close to the family. And he came in to see me. And then my parents walked out of the room. So I'm still laying in bed. I'm still on machines. And I'm like, uh-oh. Like, I'm in trouble. Like, this is like my in-person confession time here, So Father Jim asked me if I was angry with God that this happened. And that was the point in time where you say, oh, man, am I going to lie to this priest? And I did. I lied. I said, no, I'm not angry, but I was pissed. But I did say to him, I said, Father Jim, I'm not angry that it happened. Just want to know why. Why did I live? And I don't want to live like this. And I said, no one should. And he said, that's between you and God. I was like, that's all you got for me? He laughed. He said, that's all I got. He goes, but that's between you and him. And hopefully you'll find it one day. And it wasn't until months, maybe even years after. It was probably 2 years after when my story of recovery started coming out. Not only did I live, but I'm lining up for the New York City Marathon, less than 3 years from the accident, as a different person, as an athlete with challenges now.
Yeah.
And when that story got out, I started to get emails from all over the country and thank people that were in a bad way, thanking me for not quitting, because I fought this fight. I became their inspiration. And I remember calling Father Jim and I said, I think I found out. I think I found my purpose. I think I know why God made me or allowed me to live, is because I was strong enough to get through it, handle it. And I'm helping someone who's not. And 20 years later, Tim, I still get them.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
It's not easy reading all of them, but but I still get them. And I get them from fire service. I get them from the fire service all over the world. I recently connected with a guy in England who was telling me about his issues, and they might kick him off the job and blah, 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 blah. And he's been reading my story, and it's keeping him strong. And I'm like, amazing. So some of the
Who was the one person that actually got you to that spot? Meaning, like, who was your inspiration?
hero in my story is my mom. And as I told you earlier, she, with that Irish Catholic, grit and courage, stubbornness, whatever you want to call it, when she told the doctor, do the best you can, he's running Boston, there was a moment in time where the depression was getting hard. I was waiting on some things to change, and I was told by a doctor that that it looks like they've done everything they can do for me, and I have to figure out how to live my life the best as possible as is. Colostomy bag, wheelchair, like he's like, it's up to you. We're done. There was no reversals. There was no, everything's going to be in your hands now. And that's a moment where I really hit rock bottom. I said to my mom that I'm glad you prayed and you believe your prayers were answered for me to live, and I wish you prayed for me to die. And should I not have said that to my mother? So I expected maybe a hug. Like I'm crying. I'm just at the table in a wheelchair crying. And I look up at her, and she put her hands on the table, and she said, enough's enough. And she said, you're not the only person that was hit by this bus. She goes, the whole family was hit by this bus. Your fire department family was hit by this bus. You have to see how much good has come from this, and how much you were loved, and how much you were cared for, and how many people sacrificed their time over the last 5 months to be here for you. And she said, if you want to be miserable the rest of your life, do it by yourself. And I was like, ooh, talk about tough love. And it didn't hit right away, but she was right. And 2-3 weeks later, I don't know what happened to my brother Eddie was with me, and he's helping me in and out of the chair to couch to bed. And I'm like, you know what? I could do this. I just need to change my attitude. So I remember telling him, you're not going to be here long. And my attitude strictly changed. Every morning I said, I will. I will get bigger. I will get stronger. I will get better. I will change my
no
life's
more.
path.
I can't. Now it's I
No
will.
more.
I will.
Yep. And that was it. And then maybe a week later after that, I said, Eddie, I don't need you here full time anymore. And then, the brothers could do a rotation, checking on me, whatever. But I don't need you here full time. I got this. And things started to change. Months later, I went back to that same doctor, and my body had started to change. When I got hurt, I was 178 pounds. I had 12% body fat. When I left the hospital, I was 122 pounds with zero muscle tone.
But that's what saved your life, was all the muscle tone and how great shape you were in. Your cardiovascular, your blood, your resting heart rate was probably very low at the time. Mm-hmm. All of that contributed to.
So that's the next thing the doctors would always say to me is, hey, listen, we didn't save your life, you did. So, what I like to talk about, when you go through the fire academy in the gym, there's all the signs, and one, it says train for life. And I always thought that meant train in the fire service, be physical fit so I can help someone else. But I look at it now as, wow, I wasn't training for Boston. I wasn't training to be an Ironman. I was training for my life. And the doctors agree 100%. They said a lesser man would have died. But at one point, my heart rate was down to 29 beats per minute.
Wow.
And
that saying at the fire department was, don't let your ghost come back and tell you that your training let you down, right?
That's the other one. There's two. One was train for life. And then the one on the other side of the wall, let no man's ghost come back to say your training let you down.
Right. That's it.
And that's something I took with me to all my races and stuff. When I really got into the endurance sport stuff, I did multiple half Ironmans, multiple marathons, 2 Ironmans. And at every race, I would ask myself, is my training going to let me down? And, I trained with like-minded people, all the guys in the fitness unit and fire department triathlon team and running team. So we trained right.
Yeah.
And I knew it wouldn't let me down.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is that just transpired into work. That made me a better firefighter.
Right. But in the end, it transferred to, it's 3 years after your accident, and now you're training for a New York City marathon. How did that feel? That must have been brutal.
Oh, yeah. In the training, I couldn't get past 10 miles. There was one night I was actually in Central Park, and thank God everyone had cell phones at that point. I called one of my friends and said, I can't walk. I said, my hip, something's stuck. I'm stuck in the park. He came into the park, got me in a cab, and took me to 16 and 39 16. And I don't know why he took me there. It was because we were close to the park, and we filled up a tub of ice and water, and they picked me up and dumped me in it and helped the body with the inflammation. So that became a regular routine. But yes, the journey through New York, and especially past the hospital when you were going up First Avenue, was more of a mental feat than physical. I really needed it for my mental recovery. I really needed to know that the bus didn't change who I was and that I could stop running on my own terms, So it was amazing. And the fire department was just amazing with that. It was just unbelievable.
And you decided, this is after the marathon, I assume, you decided, okay, I'm not stopping here?
Well, I actually decided about 6 months before, because you have to sign up for an Ironman a year in advance.
Okay.
So I was up at Lake Placid in 2008 in July. I was a guest starter. I basically pulled the cannon in the morning, and I told the guy there, I said, I'm signing up. And he's like, really? And I was still walking with a cane. And he said, no, I'm going to do it next year. I said, but I have to be able to finish a marathon in under 8 hours. If I can't finish the marathon in under 8 hours, then I don't know if I'll show up. Because you have 17 hours to do the Ironman, So I was like,
right.
if I can give myself a cushion of 8 hours, I'll be okay. Because I could probably walk, which I pretty much did walk anyway. So I did it in 7 hours and 21 minutes. So that was it. Then Ironman was next. And I never ran or walked or anything to train. I did everything on a bike or an elliptical or on a arc trainer. I did anything I could to just build my lung capacity up, but not hurt my body like you would normally do as a able-bodied athlete. But the support, like you said, we roll back to the family that we were lucky enough to be involved in and be a part of.
When did you get married, Matt? When did you get married?
I got married 14 years ago. So, sorry. 2011.
2011. So did you meet your wife in any way as a result of this accident?
No.
Or did you know her
it's
beforehand?
funny. She is a physical therapist, so everybody thinks I married my physical therapist. No, blind date. A good friend of you probably know him too, because I know we spent many of Patty's days or Saturdays at McFadden's on 2nd Avenue back in the day.
Yeah. Well,
one of the bartenders in there.
Owners.
Well, before that, way before that. I remember specifically
when
days me, you, and Bronco
McFadden's.
when it was Ryan McFadden's, yes.
Yeah.
I remember specifically that we were there with Bronco and stuff like that. They had a nice little dance floor in the back. We had some good times there. So when it was Ryan McFadden's, my friend Chris Logan, he was a bartender there. He introduced us, blind date.
So the reason why I brought that up is kind of like the fate of it. If you don't like to look back and say, I wish this accident never happened, but if it didn't happen, now you're married, now you have kids, and you could look back and say, well, fate would have taken me a different direction. I wouldn't have these kids that I have today. And that's just the way it was God's plan.
Excuse me. Yes. It's funny is, now I travel the country doing motivational talks or inspirational talks, mostly corporations, sometimes schools. And that's usually one of the questions that pops out is, hey, knowing everything you know now in life, if you could have that bus miss you, would you? And first time I got asked that question, I didn't even hesitate. I said, absolutely not. I said, I'd have to go through it all over again. And they'll look at me like, you're crazy. And I'm like, you don't understand. I said, if the bus misses me, who am I? Who am I, 10 years, 15 years later? Like I said earlier, I said, this accident and survival story gave me a purpose to help others. So what is my purpose then? My wife, my kids, two are from her previous marriage, but they're my girls. And
right.
I'm like, I don't have that. And I like or love where I am in life. So I'm like, couldn't do it.
It's just,
it was just meant to be.
Yeah. And you wrote a book about this, The Long Run. We'll put a little clip on the podcast, a little link to that.
Cheap on Amazon.
I did want to on that note what you were just saying before. There was one question I wanted to ask you to sort of end up the podcast. But if you could have a pint with the Matt Long from the day before the accident, what would you tell him?
Buckle up, motherfucker.
You got a long ride ahead of you. The long ride.
There's a lot of guys I would like to have a pint with, as you as well, I'm sure.
Well,
there's a lot of guys.
We will be.
Yeah, one day we will. I always. It's funny. It's like I always when I talk to some people about life and what we went through, and I'm not one of those guys that walks around talking about September 11th or even telling fire stories, period. I said, but when I do, I tell people it took me 2.5 years after September 11th to get my first tattoo. I have this tattoo on my hip, and it has 4 initials on it, and Broncos is one of them. And I tell people all the time, I said, if I could just go back and get one more hug from this fucking guy. He gave the best man hugs. I said, if I could just get one more hug, it would just be amazing.
So many great stories with that guy, and
yeah, he was a good soul.
I think about him. My kids weren't even born yet. Well, my daughter was born; she was 1. But my kids know more stories about Bronco. It's like they knew him because of how much I talk about him.
Yeah, he was a good soul. He was a good soul.
Good soul.
And I can't wait for the day I get up there and get a hug from him.
Yeah.
We're blessed, my friend. We're blessed. We've been through the times we worked in the job were great. And the camaraderie and the friendships, and you have it divided into, you have your, obviously the houses you worked at and your bagpipe band. That family is probably unmatched on the fire department. It's a great
family. I'm glad I've been a part of it for the last 32 years. And I was saying to you before, we are going to be down in St. Augustine for this year's St. Patrick's Day parade there with the fire department pipe band, and we'll be there, and we'll get to have a pint there.
Yeah, we'll have a pint or two, because I think one of the guys is trying to organize some stuff that's a little closer to up here. It's a big week. It's the Players Championship week that you're coming down, so it's very tough and congested. But
really? Okay.
but we'll have a lot of fun. Yeah, I think we're gonna have a little golf day lined up.
I still have to book my flight. I'm gonna do that today. Well, look, Matt, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think it was great, and
next time we'll do it later in the afternoon, and we'll have a pint.
And we'll have a pint. Yeah.